Randy Carl Gometz, prisoner 35556-118, claims he's the victim of racism. He has page after page of statistics to support his position. He claims that as a white male, one of his juries had too many black people on it, and therefore he was wrongly convicted. These days, even a white Protestant man, claims they're victims of racism. Prison reflects our American society at large. Let me tell you the reality of what happened to that poor victim, Randy Gometz. He came into the federal system because of, 3 banks that he robbed. And they were federally insured. That's how he gets into the federal system. He was sentenced to 15 years for each bank robbery. Now you might think that means he has to spend 45 years in prison. But under the American system, he can serve all 3 at the same time. If he acted nice, he could have gotten out of prison in only 5 years. But Gometz's life of crime started when he was still a juvenile and had become a way of life for him. I knew Gometz at the Supermax USP Marion. Gometz spent years in Marion because he was incapable of living with other humans without hurting them. He's a very good example of a man who has no redeeming qualities and ability to live in a civilized society. He should have been put to death decades ago. Even today, he's too old and weak to kill people, so he fills his day with filing papers in court. I've heard him talk to other thugs and tell them to do anything they can to make the government spend more money. Gometz has devoted his life to spreading misery and hate because he's an angry psychopath who cares about nothing but himself. When Gometz isn't busy stealing, robbing, he tries to kill or help other people kill. He was first convicted in 1975 for that string of bank robberies. 5 years later, he assaulted a fellow inmate. In 1981, he assaulted a correctional officer. That got him sent to the Supermax prison, where I worked at for 23 years as a guard, correctional officer, whatever you want to call us. Let's take a little break here and explain something that some of my former co-workers get upset with me about. I use the word guard when describing myself rather than the correct term of correctional officer. The reason I say guard is that it's just a common use word. During the court case for the assault on a correctional officer in 1981, even the federal court used the term guard. If the judge, prosecutor, and the appellate courts use the word guard, then I have no problem identifying myself as such. If you wish to use the term sanitary engineer rather than janitor or correctional peace officer, then please do. I say rock, not stone. You say what you will, and I'll do the same, okay? Back to Gometz. After his assault on the CO, he was sent to the control unit at Marion. This is the most secure cell block of the most secure prison in the entire nation. While in the control unit, he helped another inmate kill a correctional officer by helping the prisoner escape his cuffs and handing him the murder weapon. 2 officers died that day, and 2 more were seriously injured trying to protect the lives of their comrades. The heinous nature of this murder cannot be overstated. The murder victims were stabbed dozens of times. Their deaths were worse than anything you've ever seen in a slasher horror movie. Imagine, if you will, being locked inside the Amityville horror house with Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers. Think about that for a moment. How scary those movies were. But you knew it wasn't real, and you weren't going to be hurt by any knife-wielding monster. Now imagine if it was real and there was no escape. That's what happened to these 2 officers. They died over a long period of time while their bodies were brutalized. They remained conscious throughout their murder. A cop on the street may be shot in the head and die relatively pain-free death. Not so a correctional officer. After this murder, you might think they'd put Gometz in a hole so deep that he couldn't hurt anybody again. But you'd be wrong if you thought that. He remained in the control unit for an extended period. In those days, prisoners were allowed to smoke, even encouraged to. Gometz scraped the heads of a large number of matches. He added things to this powder like coffee creamer and bits of carbon paper to make a crude gunpowder. He placed this mixture inside of a paper tube made with writing paper and a toilet paper tube. A projectile of a screw, a nut, or some piece of metal would finish this crude zip gun. Now to set it off, he used a wire from his radio and he'd plug it into the wall. And all he had to do was just kind of aim it as best he could, at his victim from his cell, and then plug it in, and then somebody else would die from a crude gunshot. The man he chose for this murder was feeding prisoners when Gometz tried to shoot him. One of us. It failed to work because Gometz needed 120 volts, but his crude circuit only gave him 100 volts or less. I guess he should have paid better attention, to his high school shop teacher. And perhaps they don't teach that kind of stuff in juvenile hall. Gometz claims that he was forced to shoot the future correctional counselor. He was a guard at the time. He claimed it was self-defense. After the murder of the staff, the other staff really didn't like Gometz and wouldn't talk nice to him anymore. I know the intended victim. I worked with him for years. He was a very nice man if he liked you, but if he was angry at you, he just wouldn't talk to you. He might even give you an unfriendly look. Apparently an unfriendly look from a guard because you killed a couple of his friends was reason enough to make Gometz want to kill you. He did his best, but just too stupid to accomplish his crime. The courts added 10 years to his life sentence. That might sound silly to add 10 years to a life sentence, but you have to remember that in prison, at least in federal prison, 30 years is truly what a life sentence is. It's a little game we play with the public. A guy gets life in prison and makes all the victims happy, knowing he'll die in prison. And when nobody's looking or they forget all about it, we sneak him out the door. If he's old enough, we give him a Social Security dispayment to thank him for all of his time in prison. Now, in the same vein, they gave him 5 more years for making a weapon that can kill another human being while inside a correctional facility. Now, this is supposed to be the end of the story. Most people think that ends with, and then he went to prison. But Gometz has continued to be a management issue. He has well over 100 incidents that require discipline. He continues to clog the court system with worthless appeals that have to be dealt with. My two favorites are the excuse of the guy feeding us had to be killed, because I had to protect my own life. Now, the chow isn't 5-star good, but it's not a murder weapon. And the other one was he told the court that he was too stupid to make a working gun and therefore it wasn't a danger. Try pointing a broken gun at a police officer sometime and see how far that excuse gets you. Gometz once sued my first warden, Mr. Hinman. Now, I wasn't very fond of him either, but I wouldn't have sued him. The reason was that prisoners who are co-defendants in murdering people in prison have shown that they cooperate in killing us. Now, as stupid as some of the policies, even in the Bureau of Prisons, they've seen the world, the wisdom in separating killers and not allowing them to devise new plans of murder and mayhem. Gometz tried to get around these restrictions by claiming that he's a jailhouse lawyer and he was just trying to help Silverstein beat his murder case. The one that he gave him the murder weapon and the cuff keys for. That sounds great, but, Gometz is an idiot about the law, and Silverstein didn't want his help because he had a real lawyer trying to keep him from being executed, despite the fact that Gometz sued, and surprisingly, he lost. Even the judge thought it was wise to keep the two killers separated. Almost 20 years after his crime, Gometz is still filing frivolous appeals. They're so badly written that the court tells him time and again to rewrite them. Finally, the court dismisses them until he can make a case that resembles something that might even make sense. Some of the reasons for using the court boggles my mind. In one of his better cases, he claims that a U.S. Marshal by the name of Caldwell beat him and conspired with prison guards to beat him again because he testified in federal court as a witness for the defense in a case involving the escape of 2 prisoners. According to Gometz, Deputy Caldwell attacked him in a holding cell with a couple of other U.S. Marshals. Then he called the prison and told them to rough him up again. When Gometz got back to Marion, he was subject to a routine search, which included a body cavity search because he'd been to the outside world. When he attacked the guards, they restrained him, and appropriate medical personnel performed the body cavity search on Gometz no matter how much he resisted. He even got the court to appoint him a free lawyer so he could sue the marshal and try to get a monetary award. This whole case fell apart when Gometz could provide no witness to any conspiracy, and even added that the prison had good reason to beat the hell out of him since he started the fight. What this behavior does is attempt to intimidate people like me into giving prisoners what they want to avoid being sued. This happens often. Several of my colleagues have spent thousands of dollars defending themselves against prisoner lawsuits. The government won't pay for my lawyer because the inmate claims that I did something outside the scope of my employment. That's the key phrase here. Conversely, the government will provide a lawyer paid for at taxpayer expense to the prisoner since he is alleging a criminal violation of his civil rights. I got a private insurance policy to protect me from this threat that I paid half the premium for, and the government paid the other half. Just to make it clear, Gometz sues prison guards and others to occupy his time. He gets a free attorney to do it, paid for with our tax money. I have to pay for my own lawyer or buy insurance that I pay half for, and the government pays the other half to protect me from Gometz and his government-funded lawyer. The average citizen wonders how it is possible to waste billions of dollars a year and have nothing to show for it. Well, here's one example of taxpayers' funding of an inmate's expensive hobby, and then seeing who believes his lies. When he's finally proven to be a liar, nothing happens to him because nobody wants to discourage prisoner complaints. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, by all means, hit the like button. And I promise you, it won't kill you if you subscribe. People are always asking me, why don't you put a little thing about yourself at the end? All right. To the folks that like to make those ridiculous comments, I hate the police, I'm glad that they killed your friends, I hope they kill you, blah, blah, blah. My son goes through these things and just deletes all of them. I never see them. So if you want to make those comments, his delete finger is pretty strong. He does a really good job of it, and I don't see most of them. A few slip through, and sometimes he deletes the wrong one, he tells me now and then, and says, oops, and he can't get it back. So if your very benign comment has been deleted, I apologize that he hit the wrong button or he couldn't get it back. But if you make them ridiculous comments or hateful, or you try to pick on each other, we just delete it. So go ahead. Make all them stupid comments you want, and even if I did read them all, I'm an ex-prison guard at a maximum security prison, used to be a drill sergeant and a cop. Think I haven't heard some insults in the past? So go ahead and keep trolling, fellas. It don't do any good. We just delete them.